friends, foes, frosted flakes. Good to see you all. I'm Tad. I will be here for approximately the next 1 hour reading and stuff. So, as has been the case for much of the last few weeks, there is not a huge amount of stuff to report. Just working. There's a cat riot going on, but that's nothing new in writer's world for most of us. And let me think, what else? We had some rain, so Johnny was freaked out all day and basically stuck to me. Every time I settled somewhere, Johnny was there with his face in my face, looking at me with the big dog eyes. Dad, save me. What's going on here? Water from the sky. So he eventually fled up the hill, which is what he does when it's raining. Big dog John, and hid out in the little foresty bit near the fence for a while. Came back without his bell, which was unusual, and seemed very ashamed, although I think he did it on purpose. He has a bell because he is a hunting dog, and if he did not have a bell, he would be killing things every day. So I'm sure it's a great source of frustration to him that he has to wear a bell on his collar, but at the moment he doesn't have one. So the local wildlife may not know it yet, but they are in terrible, terrible danger as the swift thunderbolt dog is ready to come down on them like a 50 megaton bomb. But anyway, so that's really what else has been going on. We had some friends over that we haven't seen for a long time last night, which was great fun. And I've been working on stuff, getting ready to go on a trip and finishing up the things I need to finish up. But really, there's not a lot going on to report since I'm working in my head on the next book. And that's kind of an ongoing process, but it won't feel entirely real until I start putting words on a computer screen. I almost said words on a page, but of course we're not dealing with pages anymore, and it's been a long time since I've dealt with an actual flesh and blood page, except for when things actually show up in book form, or at least in paper proof form. It is interesting that most of these still go out as actual books, but the process of making them is all computerized at this point. Still people, thank God. We have not yet handed the publishing industry over to AI yet, for which I am very grateful, because my publishers and my editors and my copy editor and copy editors and all those folks, translators in the non-English speaking countries where the books get translated, they are all super important, and I am very glad to have all of them. So I'm pleased that that part has not been taken over by AI yet, although it's probably only a matter of time. But anyway, they're just definitely rioting cats here in the background. Anything else that I was going to talk about? Not really. I'm just killing time, getting ready to go out of town, working on various things around the house. As you can see, the office is still not done yet, because that's a major project that's going to take several days, and I'm spending too much time running around now taking care of minor projects that are more time sensitive. And then of course every time I start thinking about the next book I'm going to write, which I do enjoy very much, thinking about a book that hasn't been written yet, because it gives me much more freedom to imagine what could be. As I've said many times before, the nicest and most fun part of writing any book is always the part before you actually start writing, because everything is potential and everything is good, and you haven't made any mistakes yet or written yourself into any corners or anything like that. So I love that phase. But even so, and here's what this rambling remark was going to lead to, even so, when I'm thinking about the book I'm working on, I invariably start thinking about other things as well. And in my case, it's usually other stories that I would like to be writing or mean to write someday and haven't gotten to yet. And I've got a list of several of them at this point, both within my genre and outside of the genre. But again, there's only so much time. One has to continue earning a living. One has to continue to get things that the readers like and put them out there, because otherwise the readers forget about you. And I'm already I'm already nervous enough about that. I don't want to be forgotten. Not yet. Wait till I die, then you can forget me. But I figure I've got another 20 years of writing left at least, and so I'd like to actually be having those books read by people. Anyway, I'm babbling again, but that's all right, because I don't really have anything important to say this time. I can't think of just stuff. I mean, it's all I'm doing is doing work, but it's not very interesting work at the moment. It's things like replacing light bulbs, fixing the dog gate that keeps the dog from going downstairs, and haunting the cats, and just stuff that has to be, lots of electronics that are constantly having to be hooked up, unhooked, rehooked up, fixed up, not working properly. And I'm the designated guy that has to do that. So I am the IT guy for my family. So, like I said, nothing interesting to report, but no complaints either. And assuming that the weather is better tomorrow, we're going to take Big Dog Johnny out of the house and walk him a little bit. He always reacts to those things as if he's just had the most overwhelming experience you can imagine. He usually comes home and sleeps. But considering what a difficult day he had today, I think that would be a good thing for him. So we're hoping we have good weather. One of the constituents just heard from. The two brothers are having a fight right at the moment, and I don't know why, but whatever. It's just part of life. It is the circle of life in our household. So anyway, I'm going to just check here and see who has showed up, and see if I can get any record of who is leaving comments. No, of course not. That would be too... Where has that disappeared to? Where has that disappeared to? I've only got four comments on the page. One from Suzanne, one from Becky, one from Nicole, and I had one, I think, from Jeremy, and that's just gone away and replaced by one from Janice Ann, checking in from Queensland. But for some reason today, it's always something new that I cannot get the what the comments are and what other people are on, have checked in. So I apologize for that. For instance, if my mother-in-law, who sometimes checks in to say hello, or my sister-in-law from England, I won't see you. Don't take it personally. It's not me. It's this stupid interface that Facebook has. Oh, and Ilva. Hello, Ilva. Hello, darling. Yes, I see your message. I thought Deb had answered your last message, so because I saw she was copied on it. I'll check on that too. Anyway, so apologies. I was going to say hello to everybody, but instead I will only be able to say hello to the people who've actually commented, and it will only be if I can see the comments at the time I'm looking for them, which, is just exactly how this thing is constantly working. Why can I not get anything? Why can I not get anything? I am so irritated here. Well, what can I say? I tried. I did my best. They have managed to mess me over again. It's either some new change on Facebook or... No, I mean, I can't... It's just not there. What happens if I press comments? No, it just tells me I can make a comment. But I know that already. I know I can make a comment. I want to see who else is checking in, commenting, etc., but it won't let me. Will it tell me up here? No, it won't tell me up there. It's just bloody ridiculous. It's every single time. They add some new thing or subtract something to make it more difficult to communicate. I mean, honestly, I know this sounds conspiratorial, but it's like, let's just make it more and more difficult until everybody quits Facebook, which seems to be, for instance, what Twitter did. Twitter's readership is down from like 20, 30% from where it was. Okay, here's some more comments on the live dashboard that I can see. So I see Ivan checked in. Hello, Ivan. Good to see you, buddy. Rosalba checked in. Wouter did. Penny. Hello, Penny. Iris checked in. Melissa. Hello, hello. Good to hear. Melissa wants to hear more about the cat riot. Cat riots are an everyday occurrence around here. The question is whether you will hear them or see them in the background, but I have no control over the cat riots. They're purely an exercise between the two brothers, and they don't consult me first, and they don't consult me during. Anyway, and I see Alexis is here. Hey, Tertian, how you doing? Isaac, hello. Isaac says it's a cat riot, can't deny it. Yeah, amen. Dirk, hello, Dirk, checking in from Berlin. Kristen, hello, hello. Good to see you. Yeah, I have that problem too, Kristen. Carol, hello, Carol. Sandra, hello, good to see you too. Mark, checking in from sunny Yorkshire. Tertian has rabies. And yeah, and she even foams to prove it. So there you go. Well, thank you for giving us that proof. But honestly, you know, none of us ever doubted that you had rabies. It was really not necessary to foam all over the comment section. But hey, that's Tertian for you. Tash checking in. Hi, Tash. There's Jeremy again. Hello, Jeremy. Nicole, I already said hello to, and here's the others I said hello to. And okay, so that's who I had online at the moment, and they just moved it to another place. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. It's all a mystery to me. It's basically about making things uncomfortable. I mean, you know, this is the, not revelation, but this is the realization that I've had so many times in the last 2 years, maybe, since I started losing parents and having to deal with changing things, and we moved twice, and, you know, all this stuff has been happening. There's been a huge amount of canceling and restarting services and all that stuff. And invariably, you hit a certain point where you're trying to, you know, make your way through the online process, and you realize this isn't working. Either there's not a category that corresponds to what you're trying to do. I've been, for instance, I've been working with the DMV for like literally 6 months, trying to just get ownership of a car transferred, because the car itself is out of state and I don't have it, and it's with one of our kids. And just trying to get it transferred from my parents' name through my brother, who's the trustee, into our name, so that, you know, we're already taking care of the insurance and all that stuff. We wouldn't let anybody drive the car without insurance and all that, but we just had to get it registered. Anyway, don't worry, I'm not going to go into the whole mess of the whole thing. What I just wanted to say is, so I've been dealing with a lot of these kinds of things, and what happens is they want you to go online. So you go online, and then you realize online is not going to solve your problems, because either they don't have the category you're looking for, or you get caught in some kind of a loop where you keep getting taken back to the same page, which you've already realized is not going to do you any good, whatever the case may be. So what do? You phone the phone numbers, and invariably they are phone trees. And the whole purpose of phone trees has become manifestly clear to me. Not that I ever doubted it, but, you know, if there had ever been an inkling, an iota of thought on my part that these things might actually be created to try to help people, it has been manifestly proved otherwise. Because what these things are trying to do is basically get you back off the phone and into the online thing again. And essentially, even that stuff, the online stuff, it's all set up to make you go away. That is the process. It is not meant to help you. It is not meant to assist you. It is meant to allow them to get rid of more human employees, replace them with bad online interfaces, or, you know, crappy AI agents, right? And so, you know, you go through all these things, and you demand to finally, you know, you keep going through the phone trees, you demand to talk to a human, and eventually you will get to a human. And sometimes they're helpful, and sometimes they're not. But the fact is that they're doing everything within their power these agencies and corporations to get you to leave the phone, to get off the phone, to stop bothering them, to stop forcing them to pay for human beings to be on the other end, and go back to using their stupid interface. And you know, the more I deal with these things, the clearer it is to me. And I'm not, you know, I'm sure there are people out there who work in the fields of putting together phone trees and stuff like that, who would step up and say I'm right. I know I'm right. I know I'm right because I used to work in things like technical writing and things like that, where the whole idea was to solve a problem or to give somebody the information to solve a problem. And therefore the success was problem solved. That was what you were trying to achieve. There's a difference with, and in these phone trees, the difference is the goal is to get you to hang up, whether your problem is solved or not, to get you to give up, to go away, to surrender, and stop bothering them. And it is more than infuriating. And I know all of you have had to deal with these kinds of things out there, but I'm particularly sensitive about this at the moment because, as I said, it's been 2 years, 2 moves, 2 lost parents, bunch of kids having moved out and moved to various places and need things like, you know, co-signing for apartments and blah, blah, blah. There's just been a ton of this stuff that we've had to do because of it. And every step along the line, you didn't know you were going to get a rant tonight, did you? Every step along the line, these systems are set up to tell you essentially, we don't want to deal with you. Go away. Leave us alone. Eventually, we're going to get rid of all the human beings entirely. We're going to throw them out into the street, and we will be a sealed, impenetrable concrete cube with no windows. And if you have a problem, then jump into our AI service sector, which is another black box with no windows. And if you get lost in there and never get out again, or your brain gets eaten by the corporate Borg, sorry, you just weren't prepared for the modern world. Anyway, that's my rant. And I absolutely mean it. I have been going through it for a long time now, all my life, but it's gotten particularly bad. And then the last 2 years have been the frosting on the cake, the chef's kiss of utter disaster of trying to deal with these large decentralized systems. Anyway, okay, so let us go turn from the modern world and all of its frustrations and go to a made-up world in which somebody is actually in charge. And in my case, it's me. Which means that I can make sure that things get solved and that I can promise my readers, for instance, that you will get answers to your questions, the questions that hopefully arise as you read these books, or in the case of what I'm doing right now, you listen to these books. And that there is ultimately, regardless of what your religious beliefs may be, I know for sure in my world that there is a guiding intelligence behind them. Behind the characters, behind everything. Doesn't mean it's all going to be happy, because then it wouldn't be a very good copy of a real world. But it does mean that I'm not going to dangle something in front of you for 1,200 pages or 1,500 or 2,000 pages and then just let it disappear. And you'll have to be going, why didn't they ever explain such and such? So anyway, sorry, another mini rant there, but nothing too bad. So I'm going to go back to reading. What we were reading was the section where we met Vorsheva's sister. Vorsheva, of course, is the wife of the missing Prince Joshua, not John Joshua, who died, who is the son of Miriamel and Simon. Prince Joshua, Miriamel's uncle, after whom John Joshua was named. And he has been missing for 20 years. Nobody knows what happened to him. Nobody knows where his wife or their 2 children are either. But we have just found out where his wife is, and that is back in a thriving camp. And we know that because we have met her sister, Chiara, her younger sister, and now we are going to find out for sure that where Vorsheva is. So anyway, going to go back and read previous paragraph or so. During the fighting, Chiara herself had climbed up onto the wagon steps, and now she blocked the stranger's way. "Do you mean harm?" to the women or children here?" she asked. "We will fight you if we must." "I do not hurt women," he growled. "I do not hurt children. I want answers only. I seek my mother, the woman called Vorsheva." "By all the gods and all the saints of Sacred Mother Church!" Yara was so astounded she muddled her prayers together again. "Vorsheva? You are my sister's child?" He looked at her, not particularly interested. The familiar thing she had noticed was now plainer, a likeness in the eyes and the hawk-like nose and strong jaw that could only have come from her own family's blood. "So I've been told. Is she still alive?" "She is alive, and she is here," said Hiara. "By the Thunderer, I do not know what to say." A sudden thought came. "But if you wish to speak to her, you had better be fast. They will bring back my husband any moment now, and he will be angry. You must leave before he gets here. He is a terrible man." "No," said the stranger, and his face suddenly went hard, as her sister's face sometimes went hard. It was like seeing a ghost. "Your husband is strong, perhaps, or cruel, or even dangerous, but those are not the same." I don't understand," she said, but she fumbled off the latch and pushed the wagon's door open. "What do you mean?" His look suddenly made her feel sick to her stomach. He was so cold, so terribly, hopelessly angry. "I am what a truly terrible man looks like." He vaulted up the steps and pushed his way into the wagon. Inside, Vorsheva stood, waiting, a look on her face that Yara had never seen before, a mixture of both hope and horror. "No," she said as she saw the stranger, and pawed at her iron-gray hair, still stubbornly streaked with black even after so many years. "No, go away. You cannot see me like this, covered in ashes." The gray-eyed man looked her up and down, and if Vorsheva's face was something hard to read, his was suddenly even more so. "You are my mother," he said at last. "Why?" There was something damaged in his voice that Yara had not heard before. "Why did you do it?" He strode forward and took Vorsheva's face in his hand, examining it as though it were some rare object, staring at each fold and wrinkle while she stood motionless but for her eyes. She slowly lifted a hand to clutch the stranger's wrist. "By my soul, it truly is you." He shook her fingers off, then pushed her back so that she thumped against the wall of the wagon. Confused and only half awake, their father, Ficomij, struggled to sit up in his corner bed and failed. "Tell me what is happening," the old man demanded. "Who is this?" Vorsheva and the stranger stood eye to eye. Kiara was frightened. The man would kill her sister. She could see his arms trembling where he held her prisoned against the side wall. But before she could move toward them, he let her go, and his hands fell to his sides. His face seemed empty of all feeling now. "Why did you send me away?" he asked. "They told me that you and my father were dead." Vorsheva did not use her sudden freedom to escape him. "I had no choice. Send you away, or see you killed. Those were his orders. Him!" She pointed to the old man in the bed, who looked from his daughter to his grandson, still not understanding. Ficomij blinked, then looked to Hiara, his face almost pitiful in its confusion. "I don't like this. Where's my supper?" "Shut up, you old fool!" Vorsheva cried. "This is my son. Do you hear? My son! And he has come back to kill you." Her lined face was suddenly lit with some deep exhilaration. "My Dearnoth has returned, and now all will be put right." She turned back to the stranger. "That is your name, your true name, Dearnoth. You were named after a hero." His son showed his teeth. Her son showed his teeth like a dog. "What sort of name is that?" A stone dweller name. But it does not matter, for it is not mine. I am Unver, and Unver I will remain. But your father was a prince. My father left us for another woman before he died. You told me so all those years ago. And where is my sister, Dara? What did you do with her? Marry her to one of those smirking brutes outside? Old Ficomij suddenly seemed to understand what was happening. His eyes went wide, and his nearly toothless mouth gaped in a grin of delight. By the Thunderer! Is this the wretched stone-dweller's son? Is this Prince Joshua's bastard come back? He laughed, an explosion of surprised amusement that turned into a deep cough. Where is my sister? Unver demanded. She is gone, Dernoth, my son. Forsheva's usually guarded expression was so naked, so raw, that Yara could barely stand to look at her. She ran away from the family that took her 20 years ago, and I have mourned for her every day as I mourn for you. She lifted a hand toward Unver, but he backed away. No, do not blame me. When your father left us, I tried to take you away to a safe place, but the grasslands were at war, and we were captured. Vorsheva, you cannot speak of this now, Yara said. Gurdig will be back any moment. I can hear them shouting for him out by the paddocks. If this truly is your son, he must go before my husband gets here. Run away? Unver gave her a brief look of contempt. After being cast out, like a lame colt or a sickly hound? No, I will stay until I have answers. He turned back to Vorsheva. Where is my father? Why did he leave us? Because he was a coward, Ficomij wheezed from his bed. He was always a coward, and he made your mother his whore. Vorsheva grabbed a cup from a shelf beside her and threw it at him. It sailed wide and smashed against the wall. Ficomij laughed, as pleased with chaos as a demented child. Shut your mouth, Vorsheva screamed at the old man. You tried to drive us apart from the beginning. She turned back to Unver. She lured him away. That Perdruinese witch, Fiera, that scroll-bearer, she stole your father from us. He left to go to her and never came back. And his noble friends did nothing to help us. Vorsheva looked around wildly for a moment, then hurried across the wagon to a chest piled with blankets. As Unver and the rest watched, she threw the blankets onto the floor and opened the heavy chest, sinews straining in her bony arms, then lifted something long and black from inside. It was a scabbard, and as the rest of it came into view, Yara recognized it. Vorsheva's husband's sword, a slender weapon even for the blades of city folk. Here, Vorsheva cried, here is his sword. Tell me Joshua was not bespelled by that Perdruinese she-demon. Otherwise, why would he go away and leave this behind? This is the blade he used to kill Utfart and win me. The tumult outside was growing very loud. Yara could hear many people shouting. She had time only to say, I warned you, it is Gurdig, before the door of the wagon was yanked open so powerfully that one of the hinges snapped. A tall, wide figure shouldered its way through, and for a moment the darkening skies behind the flames from the wagon's cook fire made it seem a kind of demon. Not so far from the truth, thought Yara, her stomach like a cold stone. Where is this stranger? Her husband bellowed, but did not wait for anyone to answer his question. Gurdig crossed the wagon so quickly that Unver Gurdig crossed the wagon so quickly that Unver scarcely had time to raise his arms before the Thane hit him with the back of his fist, hard enough to knock him sprawling into the crockery chest, which overturned. The lid flew open, and bowls and cups tumbled out onto the wagon's floor. But even as Unver struggled to find his footing, Gurdig, who must have outweighed him by 100 weight, caught hold of his tunic and yanked him to his feet, then threw him out through the open front door of the wagon and sprang out after him. "Kill him, Gurdig!" shouted old Ficomige, wheezing with delight as he struggled to get out of his bed, something he had not done in many moons. "Yes! Kill the stone dweller's whelp!" "One thing I swear," said Vorsheva, her voice gone icy cold. "Whatever happens, you will not be there to gloat, old man." And even as Yara watched in astonishment, her elder sister snatched the first thing that came to her hand, a long meat fork, and jabbed it into Ficomige's wattled neck. The old man shrieked, his eyes rolling like a panicked cow's, but even as he thrashed in the tangling blanket, his long, straggling beard slowly turned red on one side. Vorsheva picked up another object, a great carving knife, and set the point of it against his nightshirt between his ribs. "I promised myself this day," she said, leaning close to the old man's terrified face, then shoved the blade into him until it would go no farther. Ficomige's shrieks turned into gurgles. For a moment he waved his hands to no purpose, like an infant unable to control its limbs. Then he slumped sideways in his bed in a widening red stain. Chiara fled the wagon, as if demons were after her. At first, because of the deepening twilight, she could barely make out what was happening outside the wagon. Perhaps half a dozen men had dragged Unver to the ground, with Gurdig leaning over them like a bear trying to pick fish from a river. Dozens more had crowded into the camp and surrounded the combatants, shouting and cursing in excitement. Crows, startled from their nearby nesting tree by the noise, wheeled above the melee in their hundreds like a squawking thundercloud. By sheer weight of numbers, the stallion clansmen had overwhelmed the stranger, kicking and pummeling him, shouting as they did so, some of them laughing as though it were only a rough game. Chiara suddenly wished she could set all of them on fire. The brutish clansmen, her husband, the wagon, and the entire camp, and fly away like a bird. "Off him!" Gurdig bellowed. "Off him, you shit-eaters! He is mine!" Her husband was a very large man with a terrible temper, as Chiara and the clansmen knew well. The men swiftly untangled themselves from Unver and rolled away. The last pair dragged the stranger to his feet and pushed him staggering toward Gurdig, who felled him with a single blow of his thick fist. "How do you dare to push your way into the March Thane's wagon?" Gurdig said, standing over him. "What clan do you come from?" Unver looked up at him, his eyes still bright in a mask of blood and dirt. "I have no clan. I came for what is mine." One of Gurdig's followers handed him a long curved sword. "Then die nameless," the Thane said, and spat on the ground. Gurdig turned to the men who had now formed a rough circle around the two of them. "Someone give him a blade, so that I will at least have a hoof paring's less shame when I kill him." Chiara felt someone's shoulder past her, almost tumbling her off the wagon's shallow front step. It was Vorsheva, who threw something toward Unver. It struck pommel first and fell flat on the ground, a long, thin, straight sword, a stone dweller sword. "Take it!" Vorsheva cried. "Your father called it Nidel." "He named his sword a needle." Gurdig threw back his head and laughed, the twin braids of his beard bouncing on his chest. "Good! Very good! To call a man's weapon, especially such a puny one, after a woman's tool." Unver looked down at the sword, blood dripping from his chin, but he did not pick it up. "I want nothing of this. I want nothing of his." Thane Gurdig laughed again. "Then I shall give you something of mine," he said, and leaped forward, swinging his great sword in a horizontal arc meant to decapitate the other men with one stroke. Unver rolled out of the way and let Gurdig's momentum carry him past, but it was a near thing. The March Thane turned. His smile was wolfish. "I see there is some fight left in you. That is good, by the grass thunderer. I will have some evening entertainment after all. He moved toward him, this time in a more controlled way, swiping this way and that, making Unver creep back toward the fire pit. Watch out for the fire! Vorsheva cried. Wife, shouted Gurdig, tell your sister to keep her mouth shut, or I will shut it well and truly when I've finished with this horse-stealer. For the first time, Unver's face showed something other than disgust and resignation. I am no thief. I came only for what is mine. But everything here is mine, little man, said Gurdig, slashing again. Unver leaped backward over the pit before he could be driven into the flames, but landed badly. When he turned, he could barely stand straight. Several of the other clansmen moved to shove him back toward Gurdig, but the Thane waved them off and began to stalk Unver, the fire now between him. The trees were thick with crows. Their squawking cries almost overtopped the shouts of Gurdig's men, and even in the midst of all that was happening before her, Hiara felt a moment of superstitious dread. Nesting season for the blackbirds was over. Where had they all come from? It was like the famous story of Edizel Shan, when the crows came from all over the world to salute the hero's birth. But sometimes they came to herald a disaster, too. For long moments, Unver kept the fire between them, but Hiara knew the stalemate could not last long. The younger man was staggering, while her husband had not only the advantage of size, but was not covered with bruises and bleeding welts from a beating, as his opponent was. Gurdig already seemed almost bored with the chase. After a feint first to one side and then the other, the March Thane leaped over the fire pit and landed on the other side with a thump of impact and a scatter of sparks. Now nothing lay between him and the stranger but trampled grass. Swiping his blade again and again like a scythe, Gurdig drove the other man toward the ring of spectators, but they only fell back a little way before stopping. When Unver reached them, rough hands shoved him back toward Gurdig. I did not come seeking a fight, he said, breathing hard, blood bubbling in the corner of his mouth. But you and your people gave me the back of your hand. I don't care if you came in a wagon with golden wheels. Gurdig was now nearly within the span of his long blade. You forced your way into the March Thane's wagon. You struck my cousin. That is enough to earn you death and a vulture's belly for your grave, no clan. Then strike, said Unver, and lowered his arms. Many of those watching gasped in surprise or perhaps disappointment. I will be happy to leave this world behind. Suddenly there was a vast clatter and a chorus of shrill, creaking cries. Crows came swirling out of the nearby trees like a black cyclone, swirling up and out. But instead of flying away, the birds turned and stooped abruptly on the camp, wings and beaks everywhere, crowing in their flat, urgent voices. The onlookers shouted in surprise, throwing up their hands to protect themselves as the cloud of black birds dropped on them. Some of the clansfolk broke and ran away. Others fell to their knees, but the thickest part of the flock descended on Gurdig and Unver. The March Thane, suddenly blinded by wings and bright eyes, whipped his heavy blade from side to side like a horsewhip, knocking black shapes from the air. Most of those struck fell to the ground around him, but a few were battered into the fire. The stranger called the birds, someone cried. He is a witch. No, roared Gurdig. He is my meat. Hiara's husband had been forced back almost to the fire pit by the flurry of squawking shapes. The sword Vorsheva had thrown her son lay at Unver's feet where it had fallen, still untouched. Gurdig's violent swings began to drive away the nearest of the crows. Others had taken to the sky and were barely visible against the deep evening blue wheeling just overhead, still croaking in what sounded like outrage or warning. Facing him, only a few paces away, Unver did not attempt to defend himself again, but looked up at the sky and the circling birds. The firelight turned his features into a stony carving, a mask of resignation or even perhaps peace. His arms still hung at his sides as Gurdig came toward him with his curved sword swept back for the killing blow. Then a blazing ball of feathers burst out of the fire pit and flew awkwardly into the air, shedding sparks like a comet, before it swooped down and flew directly into Gurdig's face. He bellowed in surprise and pain as the burning crow battered him with its fiery wings and became entangled in his beard. His efforts to knock the thing away only made it cling more fiercely until the dying bird was screeching as loudly as the Thane, whose beard now curled and smoked where the crow clung to it. A moment later, Unver lurched forward, picked the slender sword from the ground, then lunged toward Gurdig and buried the point 3 handspans deep in the March Thane's burly chest. The dead crow fell away from Gurdig's face and dropped to the ground, feathers almost extinguished, all movement ended. Gurdig's eyes bulged in disbelief as he looked from the crow to the shining length of Nidel jutting just beneath his breastbone. He opened his mouth to say something, but only blood issued from his lips. Then he slowly sank to his knees before toppling, face first to the ground, like a falling tree. Unver stood over him, expressionless, staring at nothing. The crows overhead began to settle back into the trees around the camp, their harsh cries changing to something more muted, the branches sagging as they gathered once more. None of the crowd touched Unver. Nobody dared to come near to either the March Thane or his killer. Instead, they stood, awestruck and terrified. Someone shouted, "Murderer!" But another cried, "The crows knew!" Like Edizel Shan, Hiara thought, stunned and helpless. The birds swarmed at Edizel's birth and flew through the fire. She stared at her husband's body, at Gurdig's sightless eyes staring up into the night, but she felt nothing. He had been her world, and a cruel world it had been. Now he was dead. She felt nothing at all. She could not understand how everything in her life had changed so much in the space between twilight and dark. She was still standing when Vorsheva led her son back to the steps of the Thane's wagon. Still as speechless as an infant, he let her seat him there. Some of those who had been watching now came forward to gather silently around the body of the March Thane. Others stared at Unver where he sat on the steps, bleeding and silent, the slender red-smeared sword still gripped in his hand. "My father is dead," said Vorsheva. She almost sang it as though the words were a cradle song. "Fikolmij is dead, and Gurdig is dead." Now she raised her voice so everyone could hear. "The March Thane Gurdig is dead, in fair combat. The gods spoke. You all saw. My son is March Thane now." She put her hand on his head, but he seemed not to feel or even notice. "And you will make them all pay, now that you have returned to me. You will show them blood and fire, my son. All the clans, and the stone dwellers too. You will show them blood and fire." Unver remained silent. All around the camp, wide-eyed clansfolk whispered to one another, looking from the Thane's corpse to the black birds still watching from the trees. At last, as if waking from one dream and passing into another, Hiara went to help her sister wash Unver's wounds and bandage them with clean white linen. Chapter 53, Their Master's Folly. It was a terrifying journey down the wide avenue of the martyred Druki. The weight of her few belongings and the food she was carrying meant she had to go slowly. Not that Soja would have dared to walk much faster, even if she could. No slave ever wanted to attract attention, so they all went at much the same pace, just fast enough not to be accused of slacking, but not so swift as to attract the attention of suspicious guards. The thoroughfare was dazzlingly lit by Nakiga's standards, with a torch column at every crossing, but the light, for which Soja was usually so grateful, now made her feel conspicuous and vulnerable. She pulled the hood of her cloak down as far as she dared, as a trio of fully armored sacrifices walked past, but the soldiers were discussing something and did not even look at her. When they were gone, she stepped up out of the gutter and continued on. The streets were quiet, which was not unusual. Unless there was a public celebration, Nakiga was never noisy, but also strangely empty. Something was happening, Soja could tell. "Nothing to me," she reminded herself. "It's nothing to me. Head down, walk straight, don't bump into any Hikidaya, and don't look up unless someone addresses me." It was a good thing that all slaves in Nakiga were frightened of being noticed, because that was at least one way in which Soja did not have to pretend. She turned off the broad avenue into the slightly less daunting confines of the Street of Sacred Discipline, a shadowy, narrow passage with old stone houses looming close on both sides. Some of the buildings were training dormitories for the Order of Song, which made her anxious. Even the youngest singers were strange and could be full of disturbing surprises. But at this hour of the clock they should be at their academies, and it was by far the fastest way to the city's outer roads. So far to go. Soja had seldom left the residence in Clan Nduya's compound during the last years, and other than an occasional trip to the animal market, she only went out in Vieki's company, borne by litter on the back of carrymen. All this walking had exhausted her already, but she could not stop to rest. Her only hope was to remain unnoticed until she reached the level of the deep lake. The overhanging houses here oppressed her. Uniformly dark, finished in the slate that had been fashionable centuries earlier, they seemed like a row of heads leaning in to watch her pass. Low, narrow windows facing the street gave them the slit-eyed stare of something that had just been awakened and was not happy about it. It felt as if every window held a watcher she could not see, that each step she took was being silently observed and judged, and that at any moment someone would raise an alarm about the intruder in their silent neighborhood. She passed through a grave cache at the end of the road, a kind of fenced park built around a pile of stone slabs. Beneath it lay the crypt where the Hikidaya interred the ashes of those whom sentiment forbade dumping in the field of the nameless, but who had not been important enough to earn a place in a family tomb or in the death coat of one of the great order houses. The grave cache was largely overgrown with grass and black creeper, but here and there the bright bloom of a blood lily burned like a candle flame. A few offerings had been left before the crypt door, loose flowers and pairs of house slippers, which made her think that at least some of those entombed here must have been students from the Order of Song. Even the idea of dead singers made her uneasy. She decided a slave who hurried through such a place would not attract undue notice, so she walked as quickly as she could. On the far side of the grave cache, she left the park and was able to move into the network of smaller streets surrounding the center of Nakiga. Her heart finally slowed a little. There was much less chance that one of the lower caste folk living here would stop or question a slave, because any slave might be on an errand for someone powerful. Just as slaves did not want to be noticed by anyone, lower caste Hikidaya, both bound and pledged, did not want to draw the attention of the recognized, their high caste superiors. Utuku's people were reluctant to kill any of their own pure-blooded folk because they were now so few, But it was no gift for even a full-blood criminal to be allowed to live. The punishment for angering a noble was often far worse than mere death. But because of all these things, the closer Soja got to Nakiga's center, the less likely it was anyone would stop her. Terror is a weapon, with a sharp edge on both sides, she thought. That is its greatest weakness. A rare memory of her father pushed up into her thoughts, of him telling her, "He who rules by fear can expect at best only obedience, and even that only as long as fear remains." She had been too young to understand him at the time and had not thought of it for years, but suddenly it seemed as though he stood over her again. How tall he had seemed. She had many memories of her dark-haired mother, strong and sour as vinegar, and of her second mother, Valada Roskva, singing wordlessly as she concocted her cures and simples, her thick, deft fingers sifting the herbs into loose cloth bags. But Soja could remember surprisingly little of her father, except how wonderful it felt when he came back from one of his trips to Naban or Perdruin, how the house had seemed to glow, how easily words had become laughter. Even the food had tasted better. Until that time, he didn't come back. And that is another weapon with a sharp edge on both sides, she thought. A father's love, or a daughter's love for him. It took her 2 bells to make her way across the broad city tier and down into the lower levels, because she was doing her best to look like the kind of unimportant, shuffling creature that the Hikedaya nobles would not concern themselves with. The second bell from Martyr's Temple was so distant she could barely hear it the second time, because instead of following the well-traveled route to the memory gardens down into the ultimate depths, she had chosen that rarity in Nakiga, a comparatively new road, the clean-edged tunnel that led outward from the city and down to Dark Garden Lake, an underground body of water that her master and husband, Lord Vieki, had discovered when she herself was still an infant. Vieki had only taken her there once, but she had no fear of getting lost, because it was a well-known route. During Serpent's Moon, hundreds of families would crowd this passage on their way to the lake to celebrate the end of the days of mourning. But more than half a year stretched between now and then. Other than a few bound and their fishing boats, Soja felt sure that the end of the lake where the houses of the nobility stood would be all but deserted. The last part of her journey led her along a winding outer tunnel, barely wide enough for a single noble family's litter and baggage train. Plenty of those would be jostling down the passage when Serpent's Moon returned, but just now she heard no sound but her own footfalls, and what the Hikedaya called the mountain's breath, the perpetual soft winds that moaned through these deep passages. She wondered how long she would have to stay hidden. A dark, anxious part of her imagined what it would be like to live here in a darkness even thicker than the city's, chasing lizards for food when her supplies were gone. She shuddered, but reminded herself how fortunate she was to have this refuge. While carving out a deep shelter during the siege of Nakiga, a building crew under Vieki's command had broken through into a previously unknown cavern and found a lake there full of blind white fish and crustaceans, more than enough of them to help save the starving population. As a reward for this accidental but invaluable service, Vieki had been given one of the lake's first festival houses when they were built. But for some reason that Soja did not understand, her master had never been entirely happy about that or comfortable with the place. In fact, he had decided only a few years later to give it to his own master, High Magister Yarike. But the house on the lake had never actually changed hands because Magister Yarike died in a rockfall shortly after Vieki told him of the gift. The old Magister's family had not known about it, and Vieki himself had been too busy to give it much thought after he was named Yarike's successor as leader of the Order of Builders. Best of all, Lady Kimabu, Vieki's wife, had been told that the festival house by the underground lake now belonged to Yarike's heirs in the Kinjata clan, and she had never learned otherwise. Of all Vieki's intimates, only Soja knew the truth, because he had told her of it and brought her for a visit in the early years of their bond. Before his work had overwhelmed him, Vieki had hoped it would be their place, far from gossiping servants. So Soja, alone of all his family and intimates, had the heavy key bar that would open the house. As she made her way now, through a forest of black dripstones, toward the small estate, able to see only because of all the shining grubs on long sticky threads that dangled above the edges of the lake, she found herself immeasurably grateful that things had worked out this way. She thought of her mother, left behind so very many years ago. "A fox's den never has only one entrance," had been one of Warszawa's favorite sayings. Always have an escape ready. At least in this one way, Soja had proved herself her mother's true child. Her mother had shared that bit of wisdom long before their father disappeared, when the four of them had still been living peacefully at the inn called Polypa's Bowl in Quanitapool, and there had seemed no need even to think about such things. Now, all these years later, father and mother and brother lost to her for decades, and her own original name little but a memory, Soja saw that her mother might have been an unhappy woman, bitter as wormwood, but she had been right about always being ready to run. She was a long time hiking around the lake to the festival house in darkness, illuminated only by the in a darkness illuminated only by the sparkling strands hanging above the water. The glowing grubs swayed so gently on their filaments that they appeared to flicker, which reminded her of her names, both old and new. "Dara? It means star, my child," her mother had told her when she was small. And so did Soja, the Hikadayaso name Vieki had given to her when she had shared that little remnant of her past in the first days of their unexpected love. "Once a star, always a star," he had told her. Soja was so deep into thoughts of the past that she gasped in surprise and stumbled when she stepped out of a thicket of smooth stone columns and found the great glittering expanse of the night-dark lake stretched before her. For a moment it seemed as though she had walked directly into the starry sky, black stone overhead, black water below, and between those two horizons, thousands upon thousands of tiny glowing points. She turned, and there above her, shimmering gently on one of the stony hills that seemed to prop the ceiling of Dark Garden Lake, stood the volcanic stone house that had been awarded to her master by the palace, in thanks for the discovery of this strange, beautiful place. The path to its portico led upward between pale, dimly glowing lawns of candle-snuff fungus and white crown, to a massive front door carved with a circular wreath of leaves and grass that the Hikadaya used as a symbol for the lost garden. Soja knew there would be blankets and robes inside for her to sleep on, as well as water and preserved food to pad out the supplies she had brought with her. She would be able to live here in secrecy and safety for at least a while, perhaps even until Vieki came back. But perhaps I won't stay lucky that long, she reminded herself. She needed to start thinking about what she would do if this den were discovered too. Soja settled her bag on her shoulder for the last steep hike to safety and began to clamber up the slope of loose stones toward the front path. And that, I believe, is where we're going to stop, because that's the end of that section. And next we will be starting a new section, which I will begin tomorrow night. So, I know there was a lot of ranting and rambling at the beginning. I hope we got at least enough of a significant chunk in some action, drama, fighting, killing, stabbing, burning birds. stuff like that to satisfy you. And if not, I apologize. Until then, whether you're joining me tomorrow night or later on, I will be back tomorrow or later today at 7 p.m. And I will also probably be, I think I'm reading next week. I think, yeah, because that should be the 26th. And I won't be leaving town, I think, until the 29th. So I should be able to read next week as well. I still don't know if we're going to have any kind of chance to finish the book by then. But I will do what I can do, and that's all I can do. I am what I am, as Popeye the Sailor used to say. So with that, I thank you for joining me. I apologize for any confusion and irritation over the Facebook live broadcast interface. What can I say? I won't say anything. I'll just leave it hanging there in midair, and you can all imagine what I'm thinking. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Take good care of your friends and family, your loved ones. Leave a little bit of kindness for some other people that you may not know yet, but might need it. And with that, I say peace and best to you all. Best of luck, best of hope, best of times. And I will talk to you very soon. Okay, thanks. Bye.